What's going on, guys? Today I want to talk about Fujicolor Pro Film. So Fujicolor Pro, as the name might indicate, is a professional line of color negative films from Fujifilm. Currently it comes in two flavors. There's a 400 speed and a 160 speed called a 400H and 160NS respectively. In the United States, I believe you can only get the 400H at this point, so most of the content in this video is going to involve that film, though I have shot one roll of 160NS and I'll show some of the photos that I took with that in the video later. So both films, the 400H and the 160NS, are pro-grade color negative films, and they're both intended for portraiture primarily. They're going to have an extremely wide exposure latitude, meaning you're going to maintain a lot of detail in the highlights as well as in the shadows in any given image. Beyond that, you can overexpose or underexpose the film and still get a usable image. And if you're one of those people who enjoys overexposing color negative film, something like Kodak Portra, to get that really dreamy, pastel, creamy look to your images, it's going to work great with this as well. In fact, Jose Villa, the wedding photographer who did a lot to kind of popularize that look, he shoots 400H exclusively, as far as I understand. Beyond that, both films are extremely fine-grained and they have a very neutral color palette to them. So if you're someone who's used to shooting something like Ektar or Velvia or, any of those punchier, contrastier, more saturated films, this is going to be a very, very different look. It does compare pretty closely to Portra from Kodak. It's going to give you really neutral skin tones, really honest color representation. It's not something that generally you'd see someone like a landscape photographer shooting unless you were shooting a scene where you wanted that kind of washed out color palette, sort of like a kind of an austere look to it. Or if you're somebody who's looking to capture, a sunset or sunrise, whatever, where you have a ton of highlights as well as shadows and you don't have access to something like a split ND filter, I could see it working out there as well. So that does bring up the question of how 400H and 160NS compare to Portra, and it's an interesting question. In my opinion, the Fuji films have kind of a cooler, kind of bluer, yellower color to them than the Portra does. Portra, to me, especially Portra 400, has a little bit more saturation in it. They're very close though, and so much of that color representation is going to be a function of how you scan the film, how you take that C41 and process it and get it onto a computer or a print or whatever. It's not a one-to-one translation like it would be with something like slide film or black and white. So there is some interpretation to be done there, and a lot of that can be, that color difference can be a function of that interpretation. However, I do think it's true that the Fuji has a slightly kind of cooler, bluer look to it. That's, you either like it or don't like it. Now, the reason I decided to make this video was about a month ago at this point, I did a portrait shoot with a local model, just headshots using, I bought a new 165mm for my Pentax 6.7, and I didn't have any film. I had one roll of acros that I shot, and beyond that I had to go pick some up, and I went to the local camera store. All they had was 400H, so I said, sure, give me 3 rolls. I went out, I shot it, I developed it, and they look really, really good. I think so, at least. I got one shot in particular that I think is possibly a portfolio shot. I really, really like it. And given the circumstances, it was the middle of the day, we didn't really have a location, it was sort of a last minute thing. I'm really, really pleased with how they turned out. And it kind of opened my eyes to the potential of this film going forward. So what I'd like to do now is to take a look at some photos that I've shot on 400H and a couple that I shot with 160NS, as well as some that were submitted to me for this video. And hopefully you can get an idea of the aesthetic of the film, the look of the film, and if it's something that you'd be interested in shooting with in the future. All right, so this first photograph is from a viewer named Hogarth Ferguson. That is quite a name. Actually, his portfolio is really, really impressive. I'm going to link to it in the show notes, and I urge you to check it out if you have a little bit of time and see the kind of work he's doing. It's really, really good. This photograph actually demonstrates a lot of what I was talking about earlier, in that it has a very cool yellow-blue kind of tone to it. It has an incredibly wide exposure latitude. You can see you're still maintaining detail all the way in the background there, even in the brightest highlights. And it just has a very cool, dramatic, cinematic look to it. I like this very much. Now, this next collection of photographs came from a viewer who goes by 0 Hour on Twitter, and I'll link to his Twitter account down below. But again, really, really cool, sort of like a blue, almost metallic color to these photographs. The wide exposure latitude. It's a really beautiful, really cinematic look. It does differ from portrait though, no question. This next photograph was shared to me on Twitter by Don Kittle. Again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but really cool, really bluish colors, sort of a greenish tint to this one here. Yeah, very similar look. Same thing here. This is from a user who goes by the name Macintosh141 on Twitter. Very similar tones, very similar color to it. I know I sound like I'm repeating the same things over and over, but I think it's not so immediately apparent until you actually line up a bunch of different photos from different photographers back to back and dive in and see that there is a pretty consistent look to all of them. And these images are from viewer and Patreon patron. Thank you, Zachary Cross. These are on 160NS. Again, very similar look. Really cool. And I wanted to share just 2 photos that I've taken with it. This first one here, this is, shockingly, I didn't take this photo. I know, it's difficult to believe, but yeah, this is me. This is in downtown Syracuse, New York, and this is on 160NS, actually. I had a roll sent to me by viewer Joe Nelly. He's from New Zealand, so he got a hold of some and sent it my way, and I really like the look. Now, the colors here are not as cool as the others that I've been looking at, and it could be one of 2 things. It possibly is that this is slightly underexposed, which is saturating the colors more, which is possible. I believe it was a little bit underexposed. And it's also possible that I fiddled with the colors as I was scanning it and importing it. But either way, I think it looks really cool. I mean, I can't speak to myself. I have a potato for a head, but the photograph itself is pretty neat, and the focus is dead on, so nice work, Casey. Now, this last photograph is from that portrait shoot about a month ago, and I'm very, very pleased with it. It retains a lot of the aesthetics that we saw in those previous photos. The colors have that sort of cool pastel look to them. I might go in and fiddle with this a little bit in Photoshop at some point, but this is pretty much right out of the scanner, and I couldn't be happier with it. So yeah, I mean, 400H is a film that I had ignored for a long time, and kind of being forced into using it and getting results like this have kind of indicated to me that I should probably give it another shot and really expand my use with it some. So as much as I shoot Kodak films and portrait in particular, I'm probably going to make some room to shoot some more Fujicolor film going forward. So there you go, Fujicolor Pro films. What do you think? Do you like them? Do you hate it? Is it something that you'd be interested in shooting? Is it something that you have shot? As always, guys, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. I'm really excited to hear what you think. This is an interesting film to me. It's not something I have a ton of experience with, and I'm open to exploring it and shooting more of it and seeing how it kind of can work for me. So you guys know the YouTube drill, of course. Like, subscribe. If you enjoy this content, please consider donating a couple of bucks a month to my Patreon. Helps me buy film, helps me develop film, helps me get gear to put these things together. Really, really, really does make a difference. So if you get, consider tossing a couple of dollars my way a month. It all adds up and it really helps. So thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it. I know I haven't been putting these videos out as much as I should be. There's going to be a new one coming out next week, I promise. I pinky swear. Scout's honor. Stay safe, guys. It's International Cat Day, so I figured my cat Alistair should say hi. Say hi, buddy. He doesn't want to, he just wants to get out of my arms. Say hi. There you go, pal. How you doing? Good?